I mean, I said I like Danix a lot, and I don't know how much of that is that I like the fire guys in most thing, or that there's a cool poncho involved. But either way, I think that the kind of stoic-ish warrior who's not afraid to like still mesh with the group well. I think he adds an interesting element to the dynamic, and I can't wait for him not to be a rock anymore. But I understand why he must become a rock. It's all part of the narrative. It's all gonna get there.
I do promise he's not going to be a rock forever. He's going to be unrocked.
Rock mode. Also Aaron's fault.
Yeah.
If we wind it back.
The thing is, like, there's a way to frame it where every single part of this process was directly Aaron's fault. But also it could be argued, a lot of these were X factors he had no way to prepare for. But he's not going to take that as an answer, and neither should we.
Yeah. But we're just going to put Aaron's fault on a t-shirt and then just sell it to the masses. And that's...
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to a very special Oopsal Aurora webcomic bonus of the Overly Sarcastic podcast. Woo!
Hey!
We've got the whole usual crew here. We've got Red, we got Blue. Hi, I'm Indigo. But mainly we're here. We've got to really quickly in this episode throw to our subject matter expert, which is to say the author of the comic we're talking about today. Red, for people who are, for some reason, tuning into this episode without having experienced any of the wonder of Aurora before this, could you tell us what is Aurora and just give us a little elevator pitch for the story and where people might be able to find it if they were interested in reading it before perhaps listening to 45 to 50 minutes of discussion about it.
It's fair. Yeah. If you want to pause this and then come back later. Yes, Aurora is the webcomic that I have been making in a way that anyone can see for about 4.5, 5-ish years at this point in my brain for like almost 2 decades at this point. So it is online at comicaurora.com. It also has a Tumblr blog called Comic Aurora that has a mirror for the full comic that may be a little bit easier to read because of load times, and also just good to have a backup. The first time I brought this up on the channel, you guys death hugged my site, and it took like a week before it was stable again. So in order for that to not break everything, I have the backup now. And it's a high fantasy superhero comic kind of thing. I didn't originally think it was a superhero comic, and then a friend of mine who's good at superheroes was like, this is a superhero comic. I was like, oh my God, everything makes so much more sense now. And mostly I'm just having a good, fun, chill time with it. And we're doing this because it's getting its first volume published at the end of July, and I thought it would probably be a good idea for me to talk about it. I feel it's very silly. Like, we discussed this bonus pod well in advance. I still feel like I got shoved at the front of the stage at the talent show with a big spotlight on me. It's like, now impress us. But yes, so it's fun and good, and I'm having a good time with it, and I hope people are enjoying it.
It's a great comic. We'll get into why as the episode progresses, but I can't help but just be continually impressed and amused by the energy of, like, Red gets up on stage and mentions passingly 3/4 of a sentence that the comic exists, and then like some new portion of the audience just descends on it. It's like, oh my God, this is so cool. All the links break for like a week, and then like it calms down. And then a season later, you do the same thing again, and everyone's like, oh!
Yeah. I community tabbed it the other week, and this time the site did not break. But it did do very nice things to the volume pre-order numbers, according to my publisher, which was nice. Speaking of, on the actual Comic Aurora site, there's a link in the toolbar at top, which says pre-order the book, and it has a bunch of link options for like places you can pre-order it. There's like an Amazon one, there's Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org if you want to support your local businesses. And if you're not in the US, there's also a few other links from Simon & Schuster that have some other more localized links on their own pages. So if you want to do that, that would be a good landing page for that. I've also been told at this juncture that Barnes & Noble pre-orders are the most helpful for us, but it truly does not make that much of a difference. So whatever is...
Arcane publishing math.
Yeah, it's far more esoteric than like the analytics we're used to dealing with, where it's like, here are all of your numbers and the specific breakdown of what those numbers are. This gets filtered through like 5 different people before it gets to me.
It's like, get it wherever it's convenient for you, but if you really can't decide, shoot for Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, all of that to say, we have many questions we've accrued on the Ask OSPod Discord about Aurora over the years that I've largely been saving in anticipation of doing this bonus, because unlike Red, I have been prepared to shove her into the spotlight for this episode for a very, very long time.
Conspiracy.
So we're going to be exploring the world of Aurora and the process of creating it through your questions. So thank you to everyone who has submitted those questions. And a reminder, please pre-order Aurora if you have not already and you're at all remotely interested, because it's extremely cool. It's a lot of fun. And this first question is related to the publishing of Aurora from Katharina to Red. What part of the process surprised you the most when publishing Aurora, available for pre-order now?
Oh boy. What part surprised me the most? Honestly, how to
Was it
describe?
the amount of file transfers you had to do?
It was definitely the amount of file transfers, but it was also the amount to which it became very hands-off for me very quickly. Because when I went into this, I had no idea how much of the editing process I was going to be on the hook for. So I assumed it was going to be all of it. So they were like, "Oh yeah, this font, we've done some fixes, adjusted the kerning if there's a way that we can, you can swap that in. We're thinking of maybe doing these art modifications." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. When do you need me to do those?" And they were like, "No, we're going to do them. Just tell us which ones you want us to do." And I was like, okay. So like it's a lot of me not having to do anything, and then like, "Hey, here's the draft. Look it over. Give us your thoughts. Itemize a list of changes maybe, or like edits that you like or don't like, things you maybe want us to revert, mistakes we might have made, and then we'll send back a changed one." Whereas I initially, like, I'd heard, not in publishing, but I'd heard like, oh, sometimes people who like sign on with something like Webtoon, they get put on the hook for like redrawing all their early chapters to be up to their standard. And I was like, I didn't want to do that, and I didn't know if that was going to be what was expected of me. And like I was going into this very blind, and everyone was very nice to me, but I don't think they necessarily were prepared to have to onboard me from zero in terms of like, how does this process actually work from the inside? So it was all pleasant surprises, because it always turned out to be less work than I thought I had to do. But yes.
It's interesting seeing, because like I get all the same emails. They go to the OSP account, so I like see these blips come across my radar as I'm minding my own business in the day. So I kind of have this like peanut gallery-esque position of looking at how this all plays out. It's interesting the degree to which, like, one, the team working on your book seems to be absolutely fantastic. Like really have a great sense of what makes it so interesting, what it needs, what to do and when. It is a gift in a publishing team that I know is treasured when you get them from stories we've heard from our friends. But it's also really interesting the degree to which all of the fixes are like, they mention it and you're like, oh yeah, no, that is a really good idea. Like, click, go put it in. And it's like, yeah, let's just tidy up your font. Let's fix the chemming on it a little bit.
There was a couple times, which I thought was very funny, because it was one thing that recurred a few times, where I was like, hey, I see that you've brightened up the art on this page to make it more legible. However, I made it extremely dark because I didn't want people to see what was happening in there. So can you please fix it? And then it would come back and like dark again. I was like, okay, thanks, awesome.
The Catboy is supposed to be mysterious.
Yeah, it's that was one of the things that came back with the cover. They were like, hey, we noticed there's this really, really dark, shadowy figure in the top right corner, and I was like, I put him there on purpose. He likes to be tall and mysterious.
The audience knows.
The audience knows, yes. But yeah.
Very cool. Well, this next question comes from Hamish Pawleski. To Red, when working on Aurora and other writing projects, do you plan or outline? If so, how? I find that outlining scene for scene makes my work dry, but I have a novel I like to write, and I don't want to go off just of how the story exists in my head. So when you're writing Aurora, and Blue, I'll open this question up to you as well, because you obviously got the Venetiad. When you guys are approaching big writing projects like this, do you do any sort of planning or outlining before you sit down to actually write or draw or whatever the variant of it, the story?
I'll definitely. The thing is, like, I make the plan so that I can then break the plan. I will almost always go at least somewhat off the rails, so I don't tend to lock in my outlines too strongly. But I will definitely, usually what I'll do is I will do like a timeline, like bullet point timeline of events that I want to hit. The major beats of any given chapter, like where are we starting off? Where's everyone at? What are we doing? How do I get from here to here? And so like I'll be like, okay, I've reached the turning point between this scene and the next scene, and I know what's mostly going to happen, but I haven't quite decided what order it's going to happen, because I leave myself a lot of flexibility, which can, I think, slow down the process a little bit. And usually I'm quite happy with the end result once I get it out there, but there will be like weeks where I make no pages of progress, or 1 page of progress, or I do 2 pages of progress, and then the next day I delete those pages and I make a different 2 pages of progress, because it's character driven in a very granular way, which means a lot of times I'll be like, oh, I think I'm going to do this. And then the character will be like, I have a better idea. And I'm like, shit, okay, hold on.
The dragon cracks its knuckles.
I had this is from a chapter that already went up. When I was storyboarding Arc 2, Chapter 3, I had this plan for the big final confrontation in the chapter and how it was going to play out. And I was having tremendous amounts of trouble storyboarding it. I was like, I can't even like get a single frame. It's not making sense, and I don't understand why. And I was just sort of like spinning my wheels for days and days. And then eventually I was like, there's actually no way for me to make this final confrontation play out the way I'm planning it, because no matter what state this character is in, this is not a character they're ever going to fight. So I can't make it happen. And then I was elated and frustrated at the same time. So I was like, well, shit, the thing I'm going to do is better. But also like, damn it, weeks of academy training wasted. So it's, the funny thing is, the really weird part is that instead of outlining, I will often just sit down and write out prose snippets. Like if I'm working ahead. So like for instance, right now at time of recording, I'm working on storyboarding Arc 2, Chapter 5. And I've been working through it, and some of it is slow going. But I've also been thinking ahead to the events of Chapter 6 and beyond, and I've been sort of writing out little chunks of prose of scenes that could play out in that space and beyond. And that sort of helps light my way, as it were. It sort of feels like I'm using a map, but then in the end I'm stumbling around through the fog, and this helps me put up little lanterns in the distance where I'm like, I'm aiming for that. It doesn't necessarily matter exactly how I get there, but I'm aiming for that. And now that I've written it out in this form, I have a version of it in my head. And sometimes I'll do the prose thing, and then I'll sit down to storyboard it, and I will immediately take a hard left turn into something else after 3 panels, and I'm like, great, I guess we're doing this now. So this is just like the alternate cut of what could have happened. But I find it's always good to work it out in an artistic format before I just put pencil to page and start trying to storyboard it. Just have some idea of the shape it's going to take.
But also the way that you work on the comic, it is an art form that requires taking a lot of passes at it. So you can write a prose outline first, and then you go to storyboard it, and then you go to, is it line art that's next, or is it like text bubbles and then line art?
So storyboarding, and then I go through and I do all the panel layouts, and usually I will lay out the basics of the background, skyboxes, things like that.
And then line art, or does that
usually then line art? I won't fully polish up the backgrounds until I've got the line art laid down. And line art is the longest, most work intensive process, and therefore the slowest. But then after that, it's like, okay, color blocks and a lot of that shading, and then just like a lot of paint bucketing. So there are multiple passes, and sometimes for the very final pass, I will show all of the text boxes and turn them into speech bubbles, and connect them to who they're connected to. And oftentimes when that's happening, I'll also do last minute rewrites of like, I can tweak this, or like, I need to make this bubble a little smaller, or there's more art behind it than I realized, that kind of thing. So there's always time for me to tweak it if necessary.
Point I was driving towards is that there are many phases in the writing process where you could conceivably tweak something even after you storyboard, even after you lay down the panel orders. So even within like, I am working on this chapter page right now, having however much or little for outlining before this happening, there's an ability to kind of play with it as it's as you're kind of forging it into shape. The metal's still very warm. You can kind of hammer it around a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess I can also answer this for me. Right, and my half. In my case, I'm the kind of writer where I basically will write more complicated outlines until I am just writing the book. So I'll start with like, okay, what do I want to happen? What do I need, like plot wise, what beats need to happen in order to get to this ending that I want? Because I'm very much the kind of writer that is concerned with themes and ending and like overall story construction. So whatever happens in the middle of that is, means to an end, essentially. So I'm very focused on the big picture, like arcs and stuff like that, very large scale. How the story ends is very important to what the story means. So that is very essential in how I lay things out. And then I'll, have my first outline. It's like a page. I'll go in and make it, like same outline, but 4 pages. And then I'll go down like scene by scene. And then it's like, okay, I think like by the 3rd iteration of the outline, I basically have enough to start, page 1 and just write the thing out through. I always try to write it linearly in order, because if I start jumping around to scenes, it's going to become a nightmare. Like if chapter 2 is giving me trouble and then I jump over to chapter 7 because there's a really cool scene, I'm going to write it in such a way that I have to suddenly make a bunch of choices that I have to go back and fix and put in to make sure that they work right in chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, and it becomes a nightmare. So I'm very much this kind of outline first, but then as I sit down to write it, I essentially try to write it all in one go, like almost an oral tradition, like I speak it into existence kind of deal, which is in some regards very different to the Aurora process.
Some ways,
but in some regards it's like, I'm going to feel this scene and it's going to tell me what it wants.
That's specifically the avoidance of jumping around. That's also why the little prose snippets I do not expect will be translated into the final comic in any sort of finalized form, because the process of getting there changes things. Even on like the most zoomed in level of pure dialogue, the specific word choices a character makes can shape the entire course of the conversation that flows naturally from them. There have been times where like I'll board out a thing and I'm like, okay, yeah, this character could say that, but I feel like that'll segue into a conversation that's going in this direction, and I'd rather they go in the like this direction. So instead I'm going to tweak it, and she's saying this other thing instead, which is also in character, but it's slightly more relevant to the direction I want it to go. But yes, it's all very messy, and I kind of constantly feel like I'm doing it wrong, but it's also fun, so can't be that wrong.
If it ain't broke, don't,
Yeah. If it's stupid and it works, it ain't stupid.
Exactly. Well, this next question comes from Cameron to Red. I started reading Aurora last week and I finally caught up. I love it and I can't wait for more. How did you develop your magic system? Did you watch or read something that directly inspired you, or was it just a random mashing of more vague ideas? So how did you develop the magic system in Aurora? And if you could give us a little bit of a top-line view of what that magic system is for listeners.
Yes. So the primary magic system in this world is elemental. The world is composed of the remains of 6 primordial beings, each composed of an individual element. Their corpses have been fused together, and everything that is on this world is some combination of the elements of these things. And their souls are lingering around the planet and can be drawn down to empower a mage to control that corresponding physical element. Essentially, it's localized reanimation under the control of the mage. The whole thing is necromancy. It's a very like Death World thing.
Necromancy all the way down, always has been.
Yeah, exactly. It's a dead world. Everyone is made up of ancient god corpses. And I don't remember exactly when I decided that the magic system was going to be elemental necromancy. I feel like it seemed like a completely natural progression of the process. I think some of it was like, I knew I wanted it to be an elemental magic system, and I knew I wanted a weird number and layout of elements. I specifically remember like, well, I don't want to just do 4 like an Avatar. I want to do it different.
Yeah.
And I specifically remember like wandering around not paying attention in a gym class where we were supposed to be playing basketball, being like, what's a good, like I could do life, so I could do like plants, but like what's a good 6th? I guess I could make lightning work. It's a little bit niche. It was just like, truly just like, no, it needs to be special. I need 6 of them. And
the character of Tess emerged fully formed in lightning
from the fucking forehead of Zeus. Yeah. And I think that part of the process was I was working with the idea of like, I wanted there to be consistency all the way down. I wanted it to be like, there are things and they have names, and the names are the shape of what they are. So like, okay, the spirit of this elemental primordial is formless because it's died, but if you call its name, it remembers what it was. And like, so maybe that can also apply to humans. And then someone was like, well, what are human souls made of? And I have an answer, but it's not in the comic yet, so I won't tell you. But it sort of turned into this odd little situation where I was like, okay, the expression of magic on this specific world is kind of an anomaly because it involves using this dead thing, a thing that normally doesn't die all that often, and we don't really see any other examples in this world because it's a very strange little planet. So it's like this could theoretically happen somewhere else, but these circumstances haven't necessarily arisen before. And yeah, I don't know. It started from the elements, and then it sort of grew out in other directions, mostly because I was like, well, what if I want to do this cool thing? Like what if I want like necromancy to happen? How can I do that? And it's like, well, I just had a thing about like call the name, return the spirit, so I could do something with that. It is kind of funny, though. The dedication to hard world building started at an interesting point that I then almost completely discarded. I had this idea that, like, I wanted the underlying rule of the world to be that, like, a mind is caused by the intersection of a soul and a body. So a body doesn't have a mind, a soul doesn't have a mind, but you put them together and you get a mind. And there's, like, tiny traces of this left in the story of, like, gods are souls without bodies, but they can incarnate into bodies. And they're like, yeah, the world looks and feels very different when I'm looking at it through a body than when I'm just this featureless oversoul kind of thing. And it's like, that's the only remnant of this piece, because I found like it's a cute concept. It does not extrapolate out into a hard magic system.
It doesn't extrapolate out, doesn't it? Although it does, it like shows up in 2 separate conversations in Arc 2, Chapter 4. Like I was reading it back this morning and I'm like, hello, what's this?
Yeah, no, it's there's stuff about that. It comes through a little bit in the way that gods work, but not all that much. And it's sort of still present, but not in a big way. But yeah, I mean, you know, the magic system and the structure of the world itself are kind of the same thing. So it's definitely grown further than that over time. But the roots of the magic system were like, yeah, I want to be able to channel elements. And some of it was also like, well, for plot reasons, I want to be able to like stop characters from being able to do this. Because if everyone can just chuck fireballs whenever they want, this might be a problem. So there needs to be weaknesses built in. There needs to be liabilities. There needs to be prices for you know, casting beyond your means or something like that. So sometimes it's fun to add mess to the world building just to make your characters' lives harder, I think. But...
Well, there's a related question we have here about those side effects to Red from Nordic 08, and then there's some what seem to be runes that I had to copy paste from Discord next to that name.
You can't read Younger Futhar? Come on.
To Red, for your comic, you stated that there are negative side effects for magic if it's used incorrectly. How did you come up with these negatives, and what are some examples? So kind of...
So the thing you have to understand is that I really like the trope when a character overtaxes their superpowers and then goes into like a coma for several days. I just find it really fun. It really speaks to my experience as a person prone to hyperfocus, where it's like, I'm done. Every alarm in my body has gone off at once and now I need to sleep for 10 hours. It's like, yeah, man, that guy's just like me for real.
Rock mode.
Yeah.
Dane expands seething.
I think turning into a rock would fix me. But yeah, so... The main one that I go with is that, like, if you channel energy in a way that isn't precisely controlled, pieces of it can get caught in the fabric of your soul. And because every body of a human or, you know, anyone in this world is created by a fusion of, you know, the elements of the world, that element that the energy corresponds to in their body is going to start responding to there just being ambient, uncontrolled magic stuck in their soul. So, like, it starts... unbalancing their body, which can make them sick in a variety of ways, you know, long-term and short-term with varying degrees of severity based on how much energy is running around, which is just like an excuse like, okay, well, this person is out of commission until they can get this sorted, or like this person can, you know, function, but not very well. You know, I wanted there to be like a gradient of it so that you can have like, okay, this is really bad and this character desperately needs help now, or like, okay, this character can manage, but they're not going to have a good time, and there's like a serious time limit for how long they can keep this up. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like specific granularities that I worked out. One of the ones that came up in the comic is there's the character of Taryn, and they have water magic, but their link to water does not fully close. So they're sort of constantly experiencing an inflow of magic, which, if they're not intentionally channeling it out of themselves at all times, it accumulates. And the end result is that their body, the water in their body, has reacted to it in unpredictable ways. And for them, that manifests as loose joints. So I created fantasy EDS from first principles.
Best character.
But yeah, there's a lot of things like that. I liked... As soon as I introduced magical healing, because I wanted there to be magical healing, because it meant I could mess up my characters more. This is the only reason.
Yeah. I'm going to make you completely fixable. You're going to wish I didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same benefit you get from like having Wolverine in the party. Is like, we need someone to just get absolutely shredded. Throw the guy who can regenerate from a single cell at the problem. He's not going to have fun, but he is going to survive. But I didn't want it so that magical healing would fix everything and solve every problem. And it's like, well, there's tons of reasons. There's a lot of ways you can create problems that cannot just be immediately fixed. And one of them is just that, like, the system of healing in this world is like, if the injury is fresh, the magical healing will take effect. But if the injury has been there long enough for the person's soul to recover, the soul protects them from magic affecting their body directly, because I didn't want people to just be able to like rip somebody's bones out. I thought that would be way too broken. I was like, I don't want that kind of magic system, so the person's soul will prevent that from happening. You try to do that and it bounces off of them. So an intact soul prevents magic, but why would there be a special exception for life magic? And it's like, well, maybe if you really try, you can overload them, and then you can create like a chimera by just mutating this creature. Maybe that can work. But also, maybe it's kind of useful that, like, okay, the injury's too old, I can't heal it anymore, you're going to have to tough it out. Like, that's useful. That's good for stakes. And so a lot of the world building process was sort of a balance between like, I could do it this way, but if I do it this way, which is equally justifiable, it's more dramatic. And that's good for me. Not for anybody else, but yes, for me.
It's about being good for the author, not being good for the characters. Because the characters should experience all the horrors the world could possibly present to them and then overcome them in their own various ways.
Yeah.
Or suffer and become a rock. I'm the Danix fan, and I am sad that that's a rock situation. But I'm excited
He's
to see
probably
how
having the
that
best
rock
time in this chapter, to be completely honest.
becomes less of a rock.
He's having the least worst time.
That's true.
Yeah.
I will say there's a lot of a sense to the way you're describing this of like conscious intentional decision making, such as to give yourself a series of tools that make for the best stories, as opposed to like what sounds the coolest on paper. Oh, I'm gonna rip their bones out. Yeah, cool. The story is solved in like 2 pages. Like, Vash learns bones magic and rips the bones out of the collector on page 2. Done.
Every wizard is just casting Scrunch from now on. But the describing it as tools is very pertinent. I have a file of just like miscellaneous ideas I've had, and I call it the toolbox. Where if I'm like, what do I introduce here? I'll just scroll through and be like, oh, that sounds exciting. Blink. But yes.
Very cool. Well, this next question comes from A. Carpenter to Blue, and I'm going to open it up to the rest of us as well. What character is currently your favorite in Aurora, and why?
Oh, it's always been Aaron.
As soon as I showed you the design, you were like, I like the guy with the cool bracers. And I was like, those are tattoos. And you're like, even better.
Even cooler. Yeah. I liked him from the design phase very early. But the more I read him, the more I just love him. He's such a shit. He's such a little shit. He's the biggest pain in the ass in the whole group. He causes so many problems for everybody just because of who he is as a person.
Yes, he's the architect of his own downfall in every conceivable way.
Yeah.
I have a lot of fun with him. I've described him as like, he would make a really good villain, but unfortunately he has a moral compass, so he makes a mediocre hero instead. He's trying so hard.
Yeah. I love, and this is like today's pages got into this a little bit, where it's like, I know this is all my fault, and Tessa's like, get over yourself. No, it's not. You know you're not that important.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's this really interesting little hot mess of like, he has some unique talents. He has a lot of power. He is quite smart. He has nothing going for him except for the dragon that makes him entirely unique in this world. There are people who are comparably powerful. There are people who are comparably intelligent, but he is very used to being the smartest, most powerful person in any room he goes into. And rather than thinking like, this makes me the coolest and the best, he's like, I am responsible for the outcome of every situation I'm in because I am the one who can fix or stop it. It's always me.
What does he say at the end of chapter 2 in arc 2 where it's like, I only fuck up when I can't plan enough?
Yeah, he says that. I think it's in chapter 2 where he's like, I only fail when I leave things to chance. And the comments were like, oh my God.
I had a moment where I read that line and I'm like, oh no.
Oh no. I mean,
no.
Like, I knew.
You put a mirror PNG in this page.
As soon as I put them on the boat, I was like, I'm going to fuck up this boat so bad. I'm going to ruin this boat. All these best laid plans are going straight to Davy Jones's locker. But like, I knew thus in the setup that I was like, Aaron needs to not just be confident that this is going to work, but under the surface, he needs to be desperate for it to work. The thing that I think is interesting with Aaron is that like, he thinks he only fails when he leaves things to chance. He actually usually only fails when he gets impatient. And he is chronically impatient. When he sees the end in sight, he rushes for it. He tries to find the shortest possible path to solve the problem as quickly as possible because the part of his characterization that he will never willingly expose is that he is terrified, especially since we meet him in the comic. Like, he's in a really bad situation and he's very, very concerned, but he doesn't let himself feel it. And he doesn't let it affect his actions very much. But when he's close, he's like, okay, let's just get there as quickly as possible. All right, gang, it's super tactical. It's smart. I'm not scared. Why would I be scared? I have the situation under control. So there's no reason for me to be afraid. And it's like, who's he trying to convince there?
Yeah.
Because nobody else is fucking buying it. But yeah, no, he's such a hot little mess of a goblin man. And I have such a good time writing him because all of his bad decisions make perfect sense from where he's standing.
Oh, yeah.
But,
and the whole this is before we even add the dragon in his chest hanging out,
giving him a really good reason to feel like the weight of the world is on his shoulders. He's like,
such
finally,
a fun dynamic, especially again Arc 2 really having some bangers here, and Chapter 4 specifically, where he wakes up and Tess is like, put him down.
Because I saw a few people in the comments being like, it's so cool that Aaron and the dragon are so similar that we spent the entire last 2 days arguing over which of them was doing the stupid thing on this page, which I thought was fun.
Yeah.
Because again, Aaron would make a good villain, but he has a moral compass. The dragon is like if Aaron didn't have a moral compass and was good at being patient. And I just think that they play together in a really interesting way, which is fun. I mean, I built this whole character around the fact that I really love the superpowered evil side trope, and especially when it's like, oh, good, our friend has got the power-up that will let him get us out of the situation. Uh-oh, the power-up is now the bigger problem that we now have to fix, which is always an absolute delight. But yes.
Yeah. I mean, I said I like Danix a lot, and I don't know how much of that is that I like the fire guys in most thing, or that there's a cool poncho involved. But either way, I think that the kind of stoic-ish warrior who's not afraid to still mesh with the group well. I think he adds an interesting element to the dynamic, and I can't wait for him not to be a rock anymore. But I understand why he must become a rock. It's all part of the narrative. It's all gonna get there.
I do promise he's not going to be a rock forever. He's going to be unrocked.
Rock mode. Also Aaron's fault.
Yeah.
If we wind it back.
The thing is, there's a way to frame it where every single part of this process was directly Aaron's fault. But also it could be argued, a lot of these were X factors he had no way to prepare for. But he's not going to take that as an answer, and neither should we.
Yeah. But we're just going to put Aaron's fault on a t-shirt and then just sell it to the masses. And that's...
Yeah. I think the fun thing to me about Danix is that he's the only one of these Jokers who knows how to operate in a team.
Yes.
Everyone else is very much like a lone weirdo who's doing their best, or in Aaron's case, not doing his best when it comes to operating with a team. The thing is, if the team has a leader, it's Kendall. But if the team has a leader, Aaron thinks he's the leader. And that's very funny to me as a dynamic. But Danix is he's really good at working together with a disparate group of weirdos with unique abilities. And it hasn't come up very much, but back home, everyone else he knows can do fire magic and he can't. So he was very used to having to sort of be the adaptive, okay, I've got the 5 million weapons on my person. I know what's the best tool to use in this situation. Mm-hmm. He's just extremely well trained for a bunch of very specific situations. And then he gets thrown in with this group and he's like, okay, I can work with this. I can make this work. And He's also, I think, the one thing I think is very interesting about Danix's character is that he's the only one of these Jokers with any emotional intelligence. But he is not quite perfect at reading the room when it comes to when honesty is called for. Because it's another thing that hasn't come up so much, but the way I have the magic system is that kind of fire is the element of emotion. So a lot of fire-influenced humans have a slight degree of just casual empathy of just oh, I've picked up the vibe in this room. So he's very used to everyone in the room sort of knowing the temperature of the room. And then he can't really... He's like, oh, this person is clearly upset. I'll treat them like they're upset, but the person he's dealing with is false, the world's most emotionally repressed ball of rage. And he's like, hey, I understand that you're feeling really vulnerable right now, but don't worry, we're in this together. And False is like, I'm going to bite you. The only question is when and how hard. And it's so putting together person who can read this guy like a book and person who is allergic to being read like a book. Very fun for me. Very fun writing that dynamic specifically.
Yeah, I think what I've learned actually from this conversation, which is a fascinating little insight to the character, is that I think that Danix is the only one who would check the Google Calendar if I were to present one to this group of characters, and that's why.
Of course, he would check the Google Calendar every day just in case it changed. He would just
because he understands in a team dynamic, you need to all know the dates for things that are happening.
He'd sync it up to his phone so that he wouldn't need to specifically open his iPad to check it like certain people on this call do, which is why she doesn't check it very often, even though she could.
For a point of comparison, I feel like Danix steps on the boat, looks off the edge of it, and Bruce Banner in Avengers is like, oh, this is way worse.
Yeah, well, he's on the boat and he's like, I'm going to go along with the plan because we've agreed to this plan and I understand the logic of the plan. However, I am not particularly happy with the plan, and I do think that many things can go wrong with it. I'm just going to try and minimize the amount to which I will be the thing that goes wrong with it. And then I did stuff, and he did not get his way, but that's okay. But yes.
Indeed. Well, Red, I open the question to all of us, and if you do have a favorite character you want to shout out, go for it. But I also know that this is kind of like asking you to pick a favorite child. So
Yes.
False.
In terms of which one I use as a kickball the most, it is probably Faust. The thing is, like, look, it's so nice when he gets to express any sort of vulnerability. The problem is I've made him allergic to doing that. Yeah. So I have to put him in really bad situations before he's willing to.
And if he does, he gets mad about it for the next 3 chapters.
He gets so mad about it and embarrassed about it. And it's always really fun to deal with that. Like, I really like writing every member of the dynamic. I've been having a lot of fun writing Tess in this chapter because this is probably the first chapter where she's not having a generally good time. Because like she's in this weird, interesting space where she's sort of checked out from a lot of things that matter to a lot of other people. It's like, okay, well, she's not really, she's not tied down to any one place. She can just sort of remove herself from most situations that are going south. She can just kind of be like, okay, I'm going to blow this popsicle stand and then just bounce. A lot of things that matter to a lot of other people who are more grounded or tied down to certain situations don't bother her. So the whole time they're dealing with this like fucked up and evil thunder god that's going to like destroy this city, she's like, well, I wish someone would listen to me, but like it's not the end of the world if nobody does. It kind of sucks, but like I'll be fine. So she kind of goes into every situation with this mild curiosity of like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Oh, that's kind of fun. Oh, that guy's weird. I can see why Aaron likes hanging out with him. And then I go into this chapter and I start hitting her in the one place emotionally where it hurts, which is her dynamic with Aaron. And then she comes into this situation and we get to see what it's like when she's not having a generally fun time, when she's actually focused on one specific thing and she's not happy about it. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to write that because she has been pretty chill and cash the whole time up to this point. And I was like, can I make her serious? And she was like, you can make me so serious. Don't even worry about it, bud. Which was nice. But yeah, I mean, they're all fun to write in their own way. Otherwise, I wouldn't be writing them. So yeah. I don't really have like a favorite child in that respect. I could run down why I like each of them, but that might take us a while, especially because it could potentially include secondary characters, antagonists, anyone who's
Well, why don't we jump on to the next question and let you talk about it. Please feel free to pepper in throughout why you like different characters and aspects of Aurora at your leisure, but we'll give it some structure to the podcast. This comes from Death Ray Faye Emily. To Red, since you had the idea for Aurora when you were very little, what's the most stark difference from your original childhood era ideas and the version of the story, setting, characters, or whatever that's the actual published thing? Also, as a little side note, I've noticed you seem to use older, simplified designs for Aurora characters in earlier trope talks. It's very cool to see the occasional Faust, Elanua, or Kendall.
Yes. That is correct. Some people have been playing Spot Them and noticing where I put them.
It's been a while since they've shown up in a trope talk, as I understand, now that they're more established.
Yeah, well, at the time it was a fun little Easter egg from me to me about a thing that nobody else could read. But since they're actually out now, it feels a little bit weird to be like, because if I do that now, there's implications. But yeah, so by far the most stark difference is that like extremely early draft Kendall was mad all the time. I don't even remember why. He was just like, oh, like in the earliest drafts, he had connections to gods, but he wasn't always what he is now. And there were some versions where it's like, oh, he's like a human, but he's been like granted the reflexes of a war god through divine intervention, and he doesn't know what to do with them, and he doesn't like it, and he's frustrated a lot of the time. And like that is not how this character functions now. Like if he does get mad, it's a very cold feeling. He doesn't get shouty in any way. He's one of those characters that gets very quiet in fights, and I think that's a lot of fun. And that is not at all what his first draft version was, and I like this one a lot better because he's more interesting and harder to read in a lot of key ways. Doesn't wear his heart on his sleeve so much, which I think is fun. I mean, in some ways, but not in the getting pissed ways. Man, do I have any other big change? I mean, Alinwa got a lot better. I don't remember when I came up with the concept of the chimeric plague because it was one of those things that made so much sense. It sort of retroactively inserted itself into the entire story. Yeah. But initially she was a very generic, like, I want there to be healing magic so I can mess up my frontline fighters, and I'll give the power to a girl because I don't have a girl in the main cast, and maybe she can cry a bunch. And then at some point I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And she became significantly more interesting after that. So, but in my defense, I was like 12 and I'd internalized a lot of things without checking twice. Yeah. But there was... There was a stretch of time where I was like, and then I guess I'll probably make these two go into a romantic relationship because that is what you do in fantasy. And then at some point I was like, what the fuck am I doing? I don't have to do that. And then I didn't. And it worked so much better and it was much less uncomfortable for me to think about.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it was just like things I hadn't examined and I was like including in my early drafts because that was what you did in fantasy. And then at some point I was like, I can only do the things I like forever, actually, and that'll be fine. I can just have dessert before dinner and I don't really care. And then it worked. It worked good. So, yes.
Very cool. Well, this question comes from O Time Thy D4s. To Red, do you have any specific process for naming your characters for Aurora? Any characters had a different naming process than normal. So how do you come up with the names for your characters?
It is truly these syllables sound nice together. Let me Google it to make sure it's not a Hungarian swear word, and then we're good.
IKEA test.
Yeah. You can kind of tell, like, some of the early characters just have names. Aaron, I was like, that's fine. That's unnamed. It's fine. Kendall, that's unnamed. I didn't know at the time. That's fine. I saw it on a locker in high school, and I was like, uh-oh. But it's fine. It's not spelled that way, so it doesn't really matter. And then some of them, genuinely, I would mistype something and be like, hey, that looks pretty good. And I'd save it for later. I have a character, I don't know if they're ever going to show up, but their name is Hryd, H-R-Y-D. And I don't know what word I fucked up so catastrophically typing that, but I was like, that's good. I'll save it.
I'm looking at the keyboard. I have no goddamn idea what you were trying to type.
I think I was like on the wrong row or something, but even then, I don't know. It's who the fuck even knows. But yeah, it's very shambolic. I will occasionally be like, oh, you know, this word has like a meaning that works for that, or like this nickname has a meaning that works for that. But sometimes it's just like vibes. And honestly, the vibes have served me pretty well so far. It's kind of cool because I had the character, a minor antagonist, who goes by Shrike, and someone was like, oh, that's so smart because the Shrike bird is like actually a surprisingly vicious hunter that like impales its opponents on thorns. And I was like, yeah, I called her that because we'd been playing Exalted, and the 5-metal Shrike, which is a big warship, was a thing we said 17 times in one session. Yeah. And I just had it rattling around in my head, and I was like, Shrike is a pretty name for a girl. Let's go. It sounds like kind of an ass kicker. I could see that making sense.
Shrike is a pretty name for the worst woman ever.
Oh my god, she's so awful. I love her so much.
But definitely my favorite secondary character, Shrike.
I can't wait to bring her back so she can be the absolute worst. But yes.
Awesome. Well, this next question comes from Navi Plays to Red, and I'll open this up to the others as well. With Arc 1 of Aurora drawing to a close at this point, having closed, what was your favorite moment of Arc 1?
Ooh. It's when Vash came back, because I wasn't actually expecting to do that. So the boarding of that chapter was a very complicated process for me. A lot of ideas came together that I wasn't expecting to come together in that one arc, because I had planned on there being like a Storm God fight since early days. I actually remember doing a preliminary design for Tynan while sitting in like a Greek thought and lit class in college, just like doodling up this dickhead Storm God. He had a beard at the time. We were talking about Zeus a lot. It made sense. But I also had this idea of like, just in the toolbox, a random moment of like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a fight, like maybe against some secondary character who had like a grudge against Vash for some reason, and they were fighting Kendall, and Kendall was like, I don't want to fight you, and they were like, all right then, I shall destroy you with your own weapon, and they stab him with it, and then, oh surprise, that means Vash comes back, holy shit, and I was like, damn, hey, wait a minute, I've got him in a fight with somebody with a grudge against Vash, why don't I do that then? And I was like, you know what would be much worse than if the bad guy stabbed him with his own sword? What if he did it because he'd already thought of this idea? Would that be sadder? I think that would be sadder. And I was right. And like a lot of things were coming together, a lot of disparate ideas that had just been rattling around in my head. But when I realized like, oh, I could bring Vash back at the end of this arc and basically be like, yes, this is not going to work as a permanent solution. You need to find the hard, slow way to do this correctly. You can't just tap out and, you know, make the culmination of your arc of not seeing yourself as a person worthy of life be this thing. You have to find you have to do the hard work of living, unfortunately.
It's very clever because the implicit goal of like chapter 2, I guess when Kendall wakes up, is like, oh, get Vash back. And they kind of put it on the sidelines because other stuff starts happening. But it's very clever to close that loop and be like, nope, Not the solution you think it is, Chief.
Yeah. And I liked the idea that, like, he had this in the back pocket, but he was holding off. And there is that question of, like, how long had he had this in the back pocket? And part of that was because I hadn't fully thought of it, but I was like, it makes perfect sense that he would have at least considered the possibility. But by the time it occurred to him, he would have already been just attached enough to being alive and helping these people out that he wouldn't have immediately been like, oh, I got it. And then like, okay, prove why you shouldn't try this again. Prove why this doesn't work. But also do set up that maybe if situation is really desperate, this is an option that we've proven does work. It's just really bad for you. Again, I love that trope so much.
Yeah.
I had to leave it as an option in the toolbox. But I think the part that I wasn't sure I'd be able to pull off was how clearly I could communicate that, like, yeah, that looks like Kendall. It's not Kendall. It's somebody else. Just through body language. And the oh shit moment of his first words out of the orb prison, which is funny because in my early draft, he was just like, oh, I've missed having hands. And I was like, that's not good enough. I need it to make it more poetic and sadder. I need to make this moment make people feel complicated feelings. Whereas, whoa, hands, bro. It's like early Vash, kind of more of a surfer dude type. And it's very funny to me that he ended up just being like a very standard shonen protagonist personality type. And then the person he left behind is a completely different kind of protagonist that makes my life so much more difficult. But yeah, I think in terms of just specific moments, that turned out to be a really good culmination of the various oh shit elements of that fight. And honestly, it was a really relief for me to see it all coming together, because at the time I was like, oh, the wheels are coming off this trolley, man. I don't know if I could bring this sucker home. And then it worked out, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found the page. It is a very good sequence where he comes back. He's like, thank you, Tina. I miss the smell of rain. Boom.
I liked drawing an oh shit expression on a dragon's face. I made my life extremely difficult by making so many complicated angles on a dragon for that final arc. But yeah.
If I had to pick a favorite sequence, I think one of my favorite panels is the one where Tannen is like, tiny sorcerer.
Little wizard.
I've
seen people being like, my stomach dropped when I scrolled down. And I'm like, good, working as intended.
The perspective is very strong for that giant face. Yeah. That's a great sequence.
It's funny because the lead up to that, where Tynan is like, hey, you're right, I should mix up my bit a little bit. Let's try something new. It was me being like, well, at this rate, they're just going to win. And that's kind of boring because they've already explained how they're going to win. And I don't really want to just have to draw several pages of them just chucking fireballs at the weather until it changes.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, haven't I said but not proven that gods are really dangerous and powerful? Because at the time, I was like, I've only ever shown gods taking L's in this. The only thing they've ever done is lose. So what if I show the benefits of just being able to build whatever body you want? And then I was like, yeah, and I may as well make it a dragon because this is high fantasy, so there must be a dragon at some point. Simply, why not? And so it's kind of funny because when he's saying on that page, like, hey, you're right. Yeah, I guess that's my fault for not bringing new material. Let's try something new. That was like me being like, yeah, all right. Yeah, let's see how well we can make this much worse for everybody involved. But yes.
Yeah. If I had to pick like the actual scene that I think I like the most, the original, or not the original, but the telling of the first fight between Vash and Tynan in the like kind of like wall painting style, gorgeous. I love that scene so much.
Thanks. My favorite thing about that is I believe the way that the volumes are delineated, volume 2 is going to start with that sequence.
Yay.
And the fact that when I had Tarim say, don't worry, it's short, that was me kind of being like, sure, this isn't going to take long at all, I promise. But I had a fun time with that. And I liked being able to sort of bring it back home to like, what was Vash like when he was like functional and the city wasn't dead? What got him the rep that made all these gods have such strong opinions about him?
I really like the whole, maybe it's just because I like a little kind of small town mystery, but the introduction of Faust and also that whole like investigating the chimeric plague and the reveal of the doctor who'd done it all along. I just find that very, very charming. I think it was a lot of fun to go through that, and like the growing dread with I would like to think I'm mystery savvy at this point in my life, having consumed a lot of mystery media, and meeting the doctor and being like, that's the guy who's behind it all, and then waiting for the characters to catch up.
He did the scary shiny glasses on like panel 2. He was absolutely evil.
Yeah. The bad guy. But it was really cool to see that play out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I had a really good time with that. When people ask, like, what's the difference between, like, the earliest draft and later draft? And, like, I had a version where Faust was just introduced, and he was clearly a good guy from minute one, just being unjustly oppressed by his surroundings. And they were like, hey, man, we think you're cool. Your wings are beautiful. You should come hang out with us. And he was like, whoa. And I was like, you know what would be better? If I let him be kind of a little messy jerk. Because I like a character who will not or cannot advocate for themselves, being treated with kindness regardless. And the thing with Faust is that he is very stubborn and very angry, justifiably so in almost every regard. And he does not operate on the assumption that people will believe him if he just explains himself. So when the situation plays, he's very frameable is the problem. He's so frameable that there were a lot of people reading it at the time who were like, this guy's the worst. I can't wait for them to kick his ass. And like to the point where I don't remember if this person never came back, but somebody was so angry that Faust turned out to not be the bad guy that they vague posted about it and then never commented again. And I was like, holy shit, okay. I did my job
worse
too well.
than the Void Dragon.
Yeah, so, and the thing is, like, I had a lot of fun with him because the thing is, like, Faust does bad things in that chapter. He's not like a morally perfect paragon, but he is also not the person responsible for the bad thing they're specifically trying to deal with. And the idea that like he can be kind of a problem, he can have done bad things and still be worthy of respect, chances, and the ability to explain himself.
Tell it to Faust.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. It was like, okay, I want this conversation to work. I want this to like come together in an interesting way. And the thing is, initially I had it's another case where like characters are like, all right, we're going to do this thing. And I was like, yeah, we're going to do this thing. And then one of the characters is like, I want to do this thing right now. And I'm like, great, amazing. So everyone else is like, great, let's turn in for the night and start searching the forest tomorrow. And Kendall's like, yes, that is a thing that you guys can do. And then just leaves through the fucking window to go find him. Because I was like, yeah, if there's one person who's not going to immediately buy this explanation, it's the person who does not buy into the same preconceptions that these other people who grew up in this society would necessarily have internalized. So it's like, okay, it makes sense that he would go off and try to give this guy a chance, but it also makes sense that Faust would not jump at the chance to explain himself to this random weirdo who tried to steal his rocks. So like, I like that I managed to sort of introduce Faust in his absolute most unflattering form and continue to reinforce that, like, look, his heart's in the right place, but he's really bad at like PR and coming across as like a good dude. And it's mostly just like the like everyone else in his life is like, yeah, he talks like a supervillain sometimes. He's doing his best. He's really good at what he does. But he will also do the scary, slightly evil thing if necessary, because that's kind of just how he rolls. A lot of these things just don't matter to him in the way they matter to us. Which is fun. It's also fun to me that like the way it's sort of played out is that when he's nervous, he does like evil grins, because it only ever happens in fights where he's dramatically overwhelmed, but like needs to like, it's like, oh, Kendall's gone off into the trees to fight this guy. So he just saw this dude jump like 40 feet into a tree and his response is to grin sinisterly. And it's like, yeah, this is just what he does when he's freaked out. He does that when he fights the murder slime later. It's just like, yeah, he looks more evil when he's dealing with scarier situations.
Yeah, the grin is a stress response, guys. Let's not get... Well, we are coming up on the time for the podcast. It has been delightful to ramble down through some Aurora waterways. We have time, I think, for one more question before we get into it. Just want to remind our audience that down linked in the show notes, you can find both the Comic Aurora website and on that website a link to where you can pre-order the physical volume for yourself, which is super cool. And if you listen to this whole episode, what are you waiting for? Clearly, you've become somewhat invested in this story if you're not reading it already. But I think we've got, again, one last question here to get through. Throw it to a bit of a goofy one from Space Wizard. The Aurora cast is playing Dungeons & Dragons. What classes and races do they play, and who's the DM? So not what D&D, not how you, the person at home, can play these characters in D&D. That's up to you. But if they were to all sit around the table, what would they play? I'd like to put forward that I think Danix would be a DM. Just having now, especially in this podcast, gone through the conversation of he's the one who knows how to use different tools and like work in a group. That's forever DM energy if I've ever heard it.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, this question came in on my Tumblr like a few years back when a lot of the cast hadn't been introduced yet, and I had answers there that I don't know off the top of my head. So now I kind of have to like come with it fresh and be like, okay, who's playing a monk, who's doing whatever. I think I got to stick with Kendall's original character concept, where it's not the concept for Kendall, but like the answer I had for Kendall, which is like definitely paladin and definitely Warforged. Like, a life form that wasn't expected to be figuring out its place in the world despite being built as a weapon. How interesting. Yes, I think I will play one of those, DM. Thank you.
Not gonna look too deeply at that one.
Yeah, hopefully this doesn't reveal deep-seated things about my character. The funny thing is, in my original answer, I had Aaron as the DM because he would be the kind of DM who like makes a tremendous amount of plan on the assumption that the characters are going to do the plot hook he puts in front of them, and then when they do something else, he's completely flat-footed and has no idea what to do, and just has to improvise a lot.
Aaron to me has infamous power gamer energy. Like,
yes,
knows all the rules of the
100%.
game so intently and will create a character custom designed to decimate any given scenario. And then they roll a 1 and, of course, have to deal with the consequences of their actions.
This
Aaron's
is a man...
pissed they're not playing on 3.5.
Yes, yeah. He's like, I could do so much template stacking if you just let me. This is a man who doesn't just check the Reddits for like the specific builds that synergize well. He's on those Reddits schooling other people on the builds
posting.
that synergize well. He's posting. This man is a Redditor, and there is no escaping that. But yeah, it would definitely be some like weird, not to call out our rolling with difficulty player Wally, but I feel like any of his horrifying hybridized multi-classes.
God, what a monstrosity he creates every time.
Yeah, every time it's like, I've got a cool, fun idea for a new combo that will basically let me do 1 million damage around. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, it's all conditional on like either he needs to roll the attack or the other thing needs to fail its save, and there's nothing he can do about it. But yeah, he'd probably go some kind of either full caster or like ranged like sniper fighter type thing of like, I don't want to ever be super close to the action. I want to be 120 feet away doing max damage with a maximized fireball, that kind of thing.
Maybe it's just the Danny and me, but the Artificer class is really is saying to me, because you get that kind of like magic vibe, but also it's a lot of, especially if you go for the armored version and not Danny's infinite damage cannon variant. There's a lot of finicky skill monkeyness to be had with messing around with that class, and I'm sure he would be multi-classing because come on.
Oh yeah. But if nothing else, the Artificer ability to build your own magic items.
Yeah.
Oh, he would be showing up with like dossiers, like briefs on like, here, Danix, this is why I think you should let me make the shoes of flying that will allow me to permanently maintain a fly spell with no concentration. I think that would be super fun and cool and awesome, and please, because I never want to get hit in combat, please, which I think would be fun. I think what character False plays depends on if it's his first game or not, because first game it's like rogue, sneaky little like halfling rogue or something like that, with the most tragic backstory he can concoct that he will not tell what the DM. I had this in the original post, I remember very specifically, is like False is like, he will not tell you what his backstory is, but he will drop absolutely fascinating RP tidbits that completely change the trajectory of the conversation. Like, the thing is, like, Austin will do this sometimes where he's like, yeah, when I'm a player, I'll just pick an NPC and be like, that person is important in some way. Or like, oh, that's the guy who killed my village or something. I feel like False would do that. It's like, don't you remember me? We were in the pit together. And the DM has to be like, oh my God, it's you! How could you show your face? And like, just immediately everything is off the rails. We're just going down that nobody's making checks, nobody's rolling dice, they're just talking, and it's really intense. I feel like it's a little bit harder with like Alinwa and Tess, because I feel like for Alinwa, playing a healer would be like bringing work home with her. It's like, let's do something not healing related for a change. Let's just do fuck tons of damage. I honestly think she might do like Lyos type human fighter, just like guy in big armor with sword, just doing his best.
Determined to just simply not be chosen by the plot and to get to participate on her terms, you know?
Yes, yeah.
I was going to volunteer Barbarian, but I think a Lyos type human fighter makes more sense.
Oh, actually, Barbarian is really... I could absolutely see her being like, okay, I think I'm going to go into a rage, and then I'm going to do 37 damage on the first hit, and it's just like, oh my God!
Yeah.
I could see that being extremely charming. The thing with Tess we have to account for is that she does not pay attention. Tess is all of my ADHD made manifest, in case it wasn't extremely obvious. So she cannot be paying attention, except sometimes she'll be the one person who remembers, like, yeah, that's in your inventory. We got that 3 sessions ago from the guy with the weird face. And they're like, what? You're right, but what? So it needs to be a class that doesn't require a ton of like focus, like a lot of attention. So some kind of frontline fighter could be good, or like monk, where it's like punch. The move is punch. We do punch. I could see that being pretty fun. Something nice and like easy, you know, without too many weird things that stack. Just like tons of damage, decent mobility. But am I forgetting someone? I feel like I'm forgetting someone.
We got Danix's DM. We did Aaron, Kendall, Olenua, Tess.
Yeah, I guess we got everyone.
That's the gang.
Yeah, that's the gang.
How about that?
Yeah. And how quickly do we think it would devolve into PvP by the end of the session?
Depends on if Faust is playing his edgy rogue or not, because you know that like I feel like part of it is just to see how much you can fuck with Aaron's plans, where Aaron is like, I'm actually going to do automatic max damage on this hit, and Faust is like, I'm going to impose disadvantage with silvery barbs. It's like, what? I have 3 levels of bard. I got them in the pit. What are you talking about? But yeah, I just think definitely I have at times been asked to interpose the problem player to like stop the problem player from being a problem for the DM, and I feel like Faust would be doing that, not because he was asked to, but just because it's fun. But yeah, I think it absolutely devolves very quickly. And I also think like sometimes, you know, the players who are like, I'm going to explore this place that you did not plan for us to explore. I'm just going to go in here. That sounds like fun. Or like, let me talk to this goblin who you do not have a stat block for and need to come up with a name for immediately. And it's like, okay, this is Bing Bong. He runs the potion shop. And now Bing Bong, the goblin potion master, is your favorite character.
We're going to make 7 checks all about whether or not this skeleton is in any way magical or important. And actually it was just set dressing the whole time.
Yeah, Danix describes something a little bit weird and everyone gets hung up on it for the next hour and a half. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty fun both table and cast. But that does bring us to time for the podcast. Red, would you both like to take us out, which is a thing that I have to ask you to do every podcast, is kind of our bit. But also any closing thoughts on Aurora and any reminders for the fine folks at home about the comic and its soon-to-be publication?
As we discussed, the website is in the link in the description, and so is the pre-order link for the book, if that's a thing that you're interested in. The book will cover the first 11 chapters, so if you want to just read through those and be like, yeah, I could deal with that on my shelf, it's an option. The fun thing about this is that you can just read the entire thing and then decide if you like it, and then decide if you want to get the book, which
but
is
also there
nice.
are fun extras in the real book.
Yes, there are some extras. There's some sketches behind the scenes. I wrote up a lot of Aaron's diary, and then we only got to include like 3 pages of it, but there's a lot. Bitches verbose. So that was fun. And yes, I think I don't have any other specific plugs to do in that front. I do have a Tumblr for Comic Aurora, where I answer questions and sometimes post little behind-the-scenes sketches, but I would not inflict Tumblr upon an innocent, unsuspecting audience, so I would never encourage you to go there. It just does exist, and it has the comic mirror. But I think that covers all the ground we needed to cover. So, until next time, I have been Red.
I've been Blue.
And this has been an Overly Sarcastic Podcast bonus episode. Yeah!
Woo. Thanks so much for listening to this Oops All Aurora bonus episode of the Overly Sarcastic Podcast. Regular episodes will resume on April 30th, but if you miss us before then, be sure to check out Overly Sarcastic Productions on YouTube and, of course, Comic Aurora online on the website and available for pre-order now. If you enjoyed the show, please rate us and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform, and if you really enjoyed the show, consider becoming a patron for even more exclusive benefits, like the After Show bonus time where we chat about literally whatever pops into our heads. It is usually whatever we've most recently watched, but quite frankly, it has gotten very off the rails in the past, so if you're at all interested in that, check out the OSP Patreon, and thanks for listening.